I'm Chris Terranova, and this is the Generational Exchange. 4 generations, 1 conversation. The business world is a tapestry woven from different threads. The experience of seasoned veterans, the tech-savvy energy of the younger generation, and everything in between. In this podcast, we'll unravel those threads, exploring the unique perspectives from panelists in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s on today's business challenges. By bringing together these unique voices, we hope to spark new ideas, bridge the generation gap, and equip listeners with a well-rounded approach to navigating the ever-evolving business landscape. Gentlemen, it has been a few weeks since we've gotten together. Everybody's got busy schedules. Jeremy and I started new jobs. Mark's globe trotting around the world. Rhett's taking over everything that he's working on. But it is great to have the whole panel back together. This is episode 11, if you can believe that already. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, I'll do a quick introduction to our panel. First, representing someone in their 30s is our friend Rhett Suchu. And this time I get to say good morning instead of good evening. Good morning, Rhett.
Good morning, sir.
And live from Minneapolis is our friend Jeremy Davidson, representing someone in their 40s. Someone else globetrotting. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. At least it's 7:30 here and not 6:30.
That's true. And yet I look fresh as a daisy. And you're looking dapper in your sport coat too. You're pulling it off this morning. It goes great with the beard.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we can see how lovely your hair is. See, last time we didn't mention it. And last but certainly not least, live from Omaha, Nebraska, and representing someone in their 60s is Mark Russell. And Mark, you're in Omaha for a specific reason, I think, and you've got something exciting to share with us if my notes are correct.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. And so I've spent the last 3 days with a variety of unbelievable coaches and professionals attending the Gallup at Work Summit. And it is a global event, which was roughly 1,000 people live in person and another 2,000 people, 2,500, I think, actually virtually. And I met people from all over the globe and large organizations. 70% of the attendees were from corporations that have embraced the strength-based concept for their companies. One of our keynotes yesterday was from Accenture, where she is the global leader for human resources and talent development, where they have deployed strengths to the 742,000 employees at Accenture. Yes, the 4th largest company in the world from that perspective. But in gratitude for all those lessons that I've been gathering and learning and coaching conversations, I would like to gift to one of our listeners a Gallup Strengths assessment and a coaching session. And so if people would submit your name to me, to my email address of mark@partnerwithbrg.com, I will draw a lucky winner on Monday, June 24th, and we will set up taking the assessment. Now, if I've already worked with you and you've already had the assessment, then we can also do a coaching session with any business topic, any management topic that you'd be most interested in. So again, it's Mark, M-A-R-K, at partner, P-A-R-T-N-E-R, WITHBRG.com. And again, I'll draw that lucky listener on Monday, June 24th.
Wow, that is awesome. That's a huge, for those of you who don't know, Mark has, this is not hyperbole, literally coached all of us. He coached my entire organization at my last company. I'm sure probably Jeremy and I at some point will pull him in to help us again. If you have an opportunity to meet with Mark and get a coaching session and the Gallup Strength, what's it, Gallup Strength Finders?
The Clifton-Strengths.
Clifton-Strengths. Sorry. It's an amazing thing because we've done this and we learned so much about ourselves. And I think from my personal experience, getting to look at things from a position of strength rather than weakness was really an eye-opener for me. And where Mark was able to coach us was he was able to help us kind of look across our organization and see who had different strengths than we did. And it really helped us kind of connect to say, okay, you're stronger in this than I am. Let's partner up. And we learned to elevate ourselves rather than looking at it from the glass is half empty. This was like, your glass is really completely full. Let's just top it off. So this is a huge opportunity. So again, before we move into the topic, Mark, just shout out the email address one more time for us.
Yes. Mark at partnerwithbrg.com. And BRG stands for the Business Relationship Group. That is the company that I have.
It's amazing.
Oh, I'll be darned. This whole time I thought he had a thing for primary colors. Business relationship group. All right, I have to remember.
You work with somebody and you think you know them, right? I mean,
Right.
Are you happy or sad about it, Jeremy? That's the real question.
he's not mad, he's just disappointed.
Yeah.
That's right. He's no longer my blue, red, green guy.
That's right. All right, so make sure you email Mark for that free assessment. It's an amazing opportunity. But with that, let's move into today's topic. And this is something that we decided to talk about because I think, especially for Jeremy and I right now, who have moved into new leadership roles, we wanted to talk about, for the first time, or maybe, in a new organization, you've landed a leadership role and everyone's established except you. I mean, that's really exciting, but it also creates a little trepidation too, right? When you're stepping into a leadership role in a place that has established history or has working culture, how do you fit in and how do you get in there without being disruptive, but also making change? And that can honestly be a bit daunting. I mean, you want to help drive change. In my case, part of the reason I was hired was to help drive some of the change, but you also want to do it in a thoughtful way and not disrespect the past and how we got here, right? So today's episode is really about those of you who are moving into a leadership position or moving to a new company. And even if you're not in a leadership position, I think you can learn a lot about coming into an organization. And how do you do that with fidelity and make it an exciting transition without being a difficult one? So we're going to share 5 key actions, because that's what we do, about what to do in those first days-ish, 90 days-ish, and 3 things to watch out for. And hopefully by the end of the episode, you feel equipped to step into that role. Even if you're shifting teams, a lot of times culture can be established in very small groups. And how do you get into that and help be a part of it and also drive it forward? So that's our topic for today. And with that, let's start the exchange. All right. So we've got our topics. I think this is an exciting topic, Jeremy, especially for you and I. This is very relevant, right? As we're kind of, what are you, about 6 weeks into your position, I think?
5
weeks, right? And I'm in 3, right? So very new, very, very relevant for us. And Rhett, for you've had to transition a few times in the same company as your role evolves too. It's also very established, right? So this is very relevant for you. So you also have the perspective of being in an established company and having to, take over a different role or step in and help drive culture.
Right.
And Mark, you've done this almost your entire career. I mean, I'm sure we're all going to have lots to say about that. So I'm excited about this topic, clearly. But let's dive in. The first topic, or the first item, is really listening and learning. And that sounds really obvious. But I think a lot of times we all want to get in there and get going. But really, before you start implementing any changes, it's really important to actively listen to understand how the teams work together. What are the existing workflows and where do they see underlying challenges? I think it's really important to make sure that you're scheduling meetings with individuals. If you can get people together in a group to talk about, the pluses and minuses and really observe those team interactions, it will help you start to establish the culture of and the ways of working at the company. But with that, listening and learning, I'll open it up to the floor. I don't know who wants to start. Jeremy, you're nodding your head furiously. Why don't we jump in with you?
Oh, I like this one. I think I mentioned in previous episodes the I like to overplay the newbie card. I'm new. Can you explain this to me? I think it's one of the coolest things about jumping into a new role or a new company. All the different people you get to meet and um, all the different things that you get to learn. Now, I'll share a lesson learned around this one. When I stepped in, I think my first week, I was setting up kind of my own onboarding schedule. And I went from 0 meetings, right? You walk in Monday morning, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got a clear calendar. This is incredible. Um, I'm going to start scheduling meetings. I want to meet with this person. And pretty soon, I think I ended up with at least 40 hours worth of meetings that first week. Didn't leave myself any breathing room. I was jumping from 30-minute meetings, 60-minute meetings. Um, and it was great. I met so many people, certainly got to meet my team individually as a group. I get to meet, folks in product, folks in sales, and really start to understand what their roles and responsibilities were. Um, what I didn't do a great job on was keeping a solid list of my notes. I've got some notes in Word. I've got some notes as email documents. I've got some notes written down in my notebook. And I ended up having to go back and carve out some time in week 2 and consolidate that down, right? So I wasn't re-asking folks questions, and build out kind of that organizational structure: who does what, who to go to for what. But like I said, that's kind of an exciting part of the role, to be able to jump in and learn all the new faces and what they do. And
Right.
I think for the most part, folks like to talk about what they do. It's a little
Right.
bit of a brag, right? I'm
100%.
responsible for X. I like doing Y. So that would be my suggestion to folks. I like that mantra. Jump in, being ready to listen and show that you're actively listening, right? It doesn't do any good to meet with somebody and not retain what you're picking up from them and being able to use it in the future.
Yeah, I think that's it's an interesting tidbit about how you collect your notes, because you can learn a lot, but you have to be organized, because you are drinking from the fire hose, and connecting those dots, as you're getting different perspectives, can be a bit of a challenge. So I think that's a nice little sidebar too, is your note collection.
Right. Yeah, flipping through the
Oh, right. Look at, I bought a new notebook and it's this thick. Yeah, so I'm with you on that. Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with Jeremy. I think, the one element that I also learned, and learned it through the skinning of the knees and, breaking of the fingers, was basically get those early meet and greets, and then start to understand the various cogs of the wheel, right? Understand how everything is put together, and then you can do that next level deep dive. It's real hard, because if you jump in too quickly, those are the elements. And, as the great David Novak, from How Leaders Lead, will say, you've got to take people with you, right? So you may have some ideas coming in. You were probably interviewed saying, hey, here's a scenario. What is it, you would change, or this is what the change we're looking for. And I think, Jeremy had a great example. Even when he landed, this current position for him, they wanted him to write out a plan, because, hey, I don't know everything yet. I need to really dive in and understand first before, I execute something. And, my last comment is probably use the velvet hammer instead of the sledgehammer, especially those first 30, 60, 90 days. But again, once you can start to put the pieces together, then you can get into that next level deep dive 2, 4, 6 weeks later, and then figure out what we want to start working towards.
No, I think that's right. Red, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Jeremy, when you were mentioning that, one of the first thoughts that came to mind for, if I was asked on the spot how I would do it, I think one of my initial thoughts is, if I already had an org structure given to me, I'd almost take that, like download it, be able to create notes under each person type of thing. So I can actually like see them in the org chart and be like, okay, this person runs this department. This is what they're prioritizing or care about. this person works under this person, they'll be interacting with X person on my team. Okay, these people match up. Just thought about it as I was doing it. I had a follow-up question for you. I mean, it sounds like you took the initiative a lot, scheduling the meetings, right? How much of that do you feel is like you are initiating it versus people initiating with you as you're coming into the role? And does that matter to you as much?
I was lucky. I stepped into a role at a relatively small company, right? I think we're maybe 30 folks strong now. So the org chart was pretty manageable.
Yeah.
They did an all hands meeting the Friday before I came and said, "Hey, we got to remember to welcome Jeremy on Monday." So it wasn't a hugely
Right.
cumbersome task, but at the same time, as much as I was jumping in and wanting to pick people's brains and, tell me about your experiences and, what's working and what's not working and, what kind of food do you like? And they've got their normal daily business operation stuff going on,
Sure.
right? There's a handful of fires going on. There's some escalations going on. There's, fundraising going. There's a million things going on. And then there's the new person going, "Hey, can you give me a couple minutes of time?"
Right.
So I did find that I had to track some folks down, but everybody was super friendly and wanting to share, right? So it's a good call out, right? Because I think if you sit around and wait for folks to reach out to you as the newbie, um, best case scenario, their schedule gets in the way and they don't get around to it. Worst case scenario, they don't want to know you yet, right?
Yeah.
There could be politics there. So I would take ownership over that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is finding that balance, right? Where you've got to get in, especially if you're taking on a team. For me, I'm actually taking over some responsibilities from the CEO. So it's also getting time with her, and I have to listen and learn a lot about what she's doing so that I can even understand what my role is. And then, it's interesting, kind of some of my colleagues are as new as I am. So like, I think the head of sales has been here like 90 days. The chief product officer has been here like one. We joke when we're on calls together. He always says he's 1 week older than I am. So it kind of builds a fun rapport too. But that's one of those things too, where it's like, okay, what's nice about that in a way is it's also like, what's your perspective? What are you hearing? And then for the people, there's also people that have been here the entire length of the company, 15, 20, 25 years, getting their perspective. My questions are slightly different is what has changed? What do you see that's good? And then the other thing that I've added to my, especially the one-on-ones with the folks that are going to be reporting into my org, is I've asked them for a stop, start, and continue. And a lesson for me is not everybody knew what that meant. They're like, what does that mean? Right? To me, that was really, I don't know, I guess we've always used it, but I thought it was an interesting opportunity for me to pause and think about my vernacular, right? And so I had to go in and kind of say, I want you to tell me something you'd like to see start, something you'd like to see stop, and something you'd like to see continue. As soon as I said that, they were like, oh yeah, okay. But I think because of my role, they were thinking it was a meatier question than it was. So I also have to think about my position. I'm not looking to give you a gotcha, right? So they don't know me. They have no trust in me. They don't know who I am. So it was an interesting pause and reflect moment for me to think about the questions I'm asking as part of a getting to know you session.
Brett, do you want to send his new company the Chris Isms book that you created a few years ago?
I think we're going to give it a couple more weeks, Mark, but then absolutely. And
okay. Yeah.
I think
pay it forward.
Exactly. I think should be a dedicated session to that for sure.
Right? Yeah. I've already trotted out the 1,000-piece puzzle without the lid.
Okay. Good. So
that one landed better. That one, it was like, yeah, it does kind of feel like that. Like we've got 1,000 pieces and we don't have the lid, so we don't know what picture we're putting together, but let's start with finding the corners and the edges and we'll work our way inward, right? And that seems to be like, okay, cool. That makes sense. So along those lines, using, Chrisisms and things like that, the next thing is what we've already started to touch on is build relationships, right? you have to start building trust and recognizing that that does not come immediately, and start building a rapport with your team members. Start to get to know their strengths, their challenges, what are they looking for? And again, start, stop, and continue, right? Foster open communication and create a safe space for feedback. And to that end, I said that deliberately because that's literally what I say in each conversation. Like, this is a safe space. It's okay. I have one of my employees has a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge, but it's always prefaced with, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining or I'm Debbie Downer. I'm like, you're not. You're telling me your feedback, and you have, to me, I take it as I'm grateful that you're willing to tell me the truth and kind of open up the kimono a little wider. I don't take it as complaining. It's giving me a full perspective. Like, if I could wave a magic wand, if you could help us with this, that's not complaining. I don't know where the bodies are buried. I'm a blank slate. So I don't want you to feel like you're complaining to me. And her shoulders went down. And, even just in the few weeks that we've been there, the rapport has changed already. I also built a team meeting with just my leadership team, because they've all worked together, but they haven't really had the opportunity to really be together as a group because the company is growing so quickly. And I see that we had a 45-minute team meeting yesterday that was 2 hours, and it wasn't people complaining. It was us talking through, like, we got on a really meaty topic, and I'm like, let's go. Let's keep unpacking that. Let's talk about that. And the last thing I'll say is that, to Jeremy's point, I introduced a tool called Trello. And for those of you who don't know what Trello is, it's basically like a cardboard, where, not cardboard, but a board with cards, where you can make lists and you can move the cards around and add a lot of features. Not trying to sell it, it's free. But what we did was, when we were on our meaty subject, I threw a list on there, and we started adding the topics so we didn't lose them. They didn't get lost in the ether, or we didn't start tribal storytelling and then we went on to another topic. And that gave everybody an opportunity to put what they were thinking about. And to them, it meant, I hope, that I was taking that seriously and trying to get my arms around where we're going with it. So I will throw it out to the team there with after my anecdote.
Anybody shocked that he put Trello in place?
No, no.
I do like my tools.
Yeah. I found myself making more of a conscious effort to not tear down potential relationships in my quest for number one, the always learning piece. I like to ask a whole lot of questions, and I found a couple days into the position I had to start caveating that asking people to not read into my questions. Like, I'm not expecting that we have this, but do we have this?
It's not a gotcha.
This is, you gotta. So I started kind of couching my conversations. I'm not passing judgment. I understand where the company is, where we are in terms of growth and scale, but at the same time, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of recreating the wheel.
Right.
No, I'm not passing judgment when I say, hey, do we have a customer journey map, or do we have a templated communication, like a welcome letter, or do we have a dashboard, or are we collecting data for these KPIs? I think what I found, and the team's been wonderful, but what I found when I asked certain questions is sometimes I would kind of get a look at, yeah, I know we need that. And I'm like, no, I'm not pushing. My assumption is good faith at this point, right? Everybody's been operating in good faith. They're doing what they can. They're swamped. They're under resourced. That's the reason we're hiring. That's the reason I'm here. So I'm not asking as a gotcha.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd throw that out there under the relationship area. It's probably part of the always learning, but it may be important to couch that so you don't immediately put people on the defensive as you're trying to learn about what their jobs are, and really look for opportunities to make an impact. Because frankly, those areas where they say, now we haven't gotten to that yet, or we don't have that yet, or we really need that, but we don't. Those are areas that you can interject yourself and make a difference in the short run. But
Right.
how to tease those out without getting
Yeah.
The
Because you have to
defensive
remember they
posture.
don't know you.
Right.
They don't know you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Which is
Or Mark.
kind of the two-edged sword, right? So the one element that I remember is learning again, always learning, Jeremy, right? That's my gal number 5 learner. But don't listen to other people's assumption about others on your team or within the organization. So for example, I was once told by a COO, well, that person really never takes initiative. Well, upon further review, as we like to say, that person felt like they were extremely micromanaged. And when they did make recommendations, it was never reacted to, responded to, kind of went into the, Ethernet, and that was it. So that's why they felt like, hey, as long as I'm making a recommendation or a suggestion and no one's giving me any feedback, why bother? So there's, the different lens. So what I learned there was, okay, even though someone may say it, I could use that as a more curiosity element to say, and just kind of ease into that, because then you learn the other side of the story, as the great Paul Harvey would say. For those of my generation that would be driving and always listen to his noon program. But again, those are just some lessons learned along the way. So never make the assumptions based on someone else's perception. Get to know that person, and then from there you can start your coaching journey with them.
That's right. Red, anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I think I think it's really important to get to know everyone on the team as much as you can, right? But I think especially when you're talking about the different sizes of companies, it especially becomes important, Chris, like you're saying, because we had this at a previous company when I was working for Jeremy, where you have this core group that really trusts each other, and you can have those open and sometimes difficult conversations and figure out how to best handle them with a team of 100+ people or whatever it may be. Right. And so you having an open and trusting and transparent relationship with your leadership team is critical when every decision and conversation you're having with them impacts not only them, but the 25 people under them. Right. And so I think it's important, regardless of how big your team is, that you do this, because of course you're going to build people and build the company, but especially if you're going in fresh to something that's much larger, I think that's critical as well, like you guys are saying.
No, for sure. Which kind of leads us into the next point is embrace the history of the company, but innovate for the future, right? You have to acknowledge the organization's past successes, establish practices, but also don't be afraid to identify those areas of improvement and implement, new solutions that move the organization forward, right? And that's something that I have to be cautious of, because being I guess after working this many years, a lot of things that have opportunity to change at my current organization, I've seen in the past in some form or fashion. And what I have to be cautious of is not coming in and being Mr. Fix It. I can fix that. I can fix that. I can fix that. I can fix that. Right. Because there is, you have to go, what is it? You have to go, Mark used to say this, you have to go slow to go fast, right? Isn't that the saying?
You have to slow down so you can go fast.
Thank you. You have to understand a little bit about how we got there. And that is something that I've also picked up, to your point, Jeremy, of when people are a little cautious to go, yeah, we don't have a dashboard, or no, we don't have that. It's like what I've been picking up saying is, I totally understand how we got here. This is not being critical, but how do we move past it now that we have the opportunity? We might have new resources, like Jeremy, you said, that's why I'm here. And one of the other things that Jeremy's using his backgrounds, for those of you who are watching or not watching, you should watch this on YouTube. But one of the things that I'm saying too is, if we've had an opportunity to change things, or, we've tried that for 5 years, it doesn't work. And what I'm saying is, let's dream big. Like, let's dream a little bit bigger, and let's see where we end up. We may not get all of it, but let's not let the past hobble us either. This might be a new opportunity. There might be new people. There might be new budget. There might be a new perspective that changes that. Let's try it. Let's put those dreams down. Let's figure out where we are, right? And again, acknowledging the past, but trying to innovate. So that's where I'm at. Jeremy's got a question. I think he's got lots of red question marks behind his head if you're not watching.
The yeah, blast from last week. I had to pop those up for Mark. He didn't get the chance to see my.
Oh, that's right.
No, I thought I'd call out there. I'm trying to temper as I jump into this new role. I'm trying to temper the things that pop out to me and are important to me, whether it's forecasting, trying to figure out scaling for growth, journey mappings, and just general understanding or toolkit items maybe that I know would be beneficial to the team, and with what the organizational objectives are, right? So I put the question marks up there kind of intentionally as you get learning and building those relationships, and you start putting together the list, the list of things that you can jump in and start tackling. Have you gotten a good handle yet on what the organizational OKRs are, right? Do we understand what the top level objective for the business is? The objectives for your particular department, how they're going to be measured, and do the new initiatives that are all floating around in your heads, or you've captured them in your notebooks, do those feed into what that, what the overall vision was for, let's say, 2024 for your department or for your company? So I think it's really easy to get super excited about little opportunities that pop up that catch your attention. You're like, oh, we can make a difference here, here, and here. But likely worth taking a quick step back and saying, okay, how does the alignment work for those? Are we in alignment with the overall objective for what we're trying to do this year? Because chances are, depending on when you stepped in, that's a drum that the company's been hitting with your teams, with your colleagues, and nobody wants to be the one to raise their hand and say, yeah, no, that's a great idea, Jeremy, but it's really not, it's not pertaining to the 5 or 10 initiatives that are really important to us this year. So
that's a good point. I'm going to tip in really quick on that too, using my ever-present Trello board, right? As I see things that we can change, I've got a to-do later and ideas list, and I'm putting those things there because in the moment I'm like, ooh, and then we move on to something else. But if I can circle back when it becomes more relevant, or I have a broader picture, I can either move it off the list, adjust it, or go, hey, by the way, when we were looking at that 2 months ago, I was thinking about this. I'm now more established. What do you think of that? So that's kind of how I also organize those thoughts without blurting them out all the time, right? Which is something I've had to work on. Yeah. Mark?
So yesterday in one of our, we were in a session around managers and directors and elements like that. And one of the breakout questions was, when teams are making suggestions or you're making suggestions, first off, find out, has that been thought of before? And the other element is that if it hasn't, or if it has and rejected, are there incremental steps you can do? I was, chatting with a director of information technology. She has around 150 people in her organization. And that's one of the elements. It's always like, even if her senior vice president says, no, we can't do this yet, then they look to say, well, can we break this up into 2 or 3 incremental steps and get little small changes instead of the big bang? The other point I was going to make real quickly is, the NBA basketball coach, Steve Kerr from the Golden State Warriors, when he was named coach of the Warriors, they had not been in the playoffs for like 8 years. And the year that they made the playoffs, in the first time for a long time, they fired the coach that year and they gave it to Steve Kerr to come in. And so he said he was extremely conscious to make sure that they knew, all the players knew, hey, you guys did a phenomenal job last year. This is still Mark Jackson's team. I just happen to be in the position now that I had to replace him. I had no control over that, but I'm excited to work with you. And he said he purposely took 3 or 4 months before then he started to put his own fingerprints on the team. And again, make some of those little incremental changes, instead of coming in like, hey, I'm the new sheriff in town. Now we're going to do everything my way because the old way was terrible. So he really, to your point, Chris, embraced the past, gave credit where credit, as he said, was truly due.
Yeah.
And then waited until he could make some incremental changes, because then over the next year and a half, then it became his team.
It's a great analogy. Red, any thoughts before we move forward?
Yeah, no, I think I just echo what you guys have been saying and focus in maybe a bit on the going back to the previous bullet a bit, not hurting the relationships that you're creating, right? And that when you look at the things that are currently in place, there might be things that someone spent 40 hours on building. And yes, it's not the best tool, but given the budget that they had, they were like, hey, I had a Google spreadsheet and I was asked to track products being delivered to 200,000 customers. I didn't have Lucid charts. I didn't have this type. So like, just be careful about how you're sounding and maybe not, calling someone's baby ugly. I know that there were definitely times that Jeremy put me on a project and I would sink 40, 80 hours into it or something. And then it'd be like, oh, this is how I might have done this. And I was like, I thought about that. I did. But
It's a good point. Yeah, I think the through line through all of this is having awareness, right? Is not being myopic and going, okay, I've got my superhero cape on. I'm coming in to save the world, right? It can be more evolutionary than revolutionary. But one thing I'm going to say before we move on, in some situations it requires some revolutionary changes, and don't be afraid of those too, if you're given the room to do that. Like in a couple of the projects that I'm being tasked with, it's like, we need you to help us here. We know we have gaps. Get in there and make it better. And so also asking those questions like, do we need to review? Because I don't want to call your baby ugly, but it's kind of an ugly baby. But do we want to do that, or am I free to go, or do we need to do this over time, right? And being transparent is really important. So I think that's a great call out. All right, the next one is empowering your team. And I think we've talked kind of, again, another through line through this whole thing is make sure that you're delegating effectively. Make sure that you're figuring out what those opportunities for growth and development are. Encourage your team to take ownership. Again, don't come in with your superhero cape and go, I got this. Stand back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to save the day. Start celebrating the successes where you can see them, and start supporting that learning journey where people have Jeremy keeps changing his background. Help them start to build a learning journey so that they can also grow as well and find those new opportunities. Guys, I know we've talked a lot about that, but I think there's more to say there. Go ahead, Jeremy.
It's a light bulb moment.
Is that what it is?
There you go.
That's going to be my new call out for the
wonderful
insight.
Not distracting at all. No, it's
right.
No, very conducive.
Very, very lovely. Go ahead, Mr. Lightbulb.
No, I like that call out. I've not experienced this. I wonder if you guys have ever experienced walking into a team that maybe hadn't felt so empowered in the past, where maybe micromanagement was an issue. Maybe that's why you're new in the role, because they alleviated themselves of that problem. Yeah, do you guys have you had experience with walking into a team that's used to being micromanaged and all of a sudden has some freedom? Are there some really good opportunities there? Are there challenges there?
I think part of it is to understand their perception of being micromanaged, because there are definitely cases where that has occurred, from that perspective. But again, and even though, as we all know, a few of us know, Dr. Jeff Borden, perception does determine reality. So if you're perceiving something, that's your reality. So I think it's good to just understand again, what level of micromanagement, or was it coaching that was disguised as micromanaging?
Yeah, I think this is going to feed into our next point, but to that question, Jeremy, I think it's very important that you set clear expectations with them on what you're expecting and what level of effort you want there and how far you want them to take it. like we've kind of discussed, right? Because maybe it's even a degree of if they had a previous manager or whatever, they gave them something, but they either gave it to them with no framework, or they weren't really prepared for it or something like that. And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, they came back and they said, oh, this isn't what I needed at all. And then it's not that they weren't given the delegation or the power to do so, but they didn't maybe have the best building blocks to build the house. And but to that point, for sure, I think there's a bit of this within every team, even if it's just one of the individuals of many, that you have someone who's maybe been slapped on the wrist for doing something wrong, and now they're timid to do it on their own, or maybe, yeah, even we could go to the other side where you have someone who's too strong on the team and they're overpowering everyone else. So I think there's a lot of examples here.
Well, and I'm going to say
with that lead in.
Yeah, right. And before we actually move on to the next one, I'm going to say I almost have the opposite problem where I'm being empowered, and because of my history, I'm a little timid to go, and we could do this and we could do that. Kind of like the earlier one where you don't want to come in and superhero everything. But I work for someone who's amazing. Not that I'm giving a plug, but she's amazing. And she's like, stop apologizing. Stop caveating that you've only been here a few weeks. That's why you're here. That's why I'm empowering you. And so think about that, that with your team when you're empowering them. To your point, Jeremy, they may have been micromanaged, but they might like that. They might have enjoyed that they were micromanaged, and now you're kind of giving them freedom. That might be a scary thing for them. Or, Rhett, like you said, they got slapped on the wrist before, so they're timid. I have a little of that myself. So it's finding that balance and learning where those boundaries are too might take a little while.
That's funny. You got PTSD. You're like,
I think I even actually said that. I think I have a little PTSD.
You're like, you're wonderful, but not everybody in my past has been.
That's right. Well, and again, not to tell tales, but we've all had experiences where it's like, come in and make changes. We want you to fix everything. And then it's like, why are you changing that? We didn't say to change that, not that. And you're like, oh, okay. And, not knowing where the landmines are make you cautious to put your foot down sometimes.
Sure.
But leading into our last thing to think about, again, some of these things seem very obvious, but I think they're important to flesh out, is communicating clearly and consistently. And again, another through line through what we've talked about is make sure you're communicating your vision, your goals, your expectations. Try to be transparent about why you're making decisions, why you see something as a challenge, or why you see something as an opportunity, and continue to get that feedback from your team, right? And again, I've got a very communicative manager, fortunately, who is asking me questions, setting the guidelines, helping me feel safe and protected, and it's okay, right? You're not being a bad boy if you put something out there. And there have been a couple of times where I'm like, well, what about this? And she's like, not yet. I've had to also turn off that negative voice in my head that goes, bad boy, don't bring up anything else, right? No, just setting the boundaries. And if you can think about that from both sides, as the employee and the employer, and if you've got a new manager coming in, think about their perspective too. Ask questions. Most times your manager wants you to ask. And if they're not clearly articulating what they're trying to do, either because they're new or you're not speaking the same language yet, it's okay to ask clarifying questions. So communicating clearly works on both sides. Rhett, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah. I'll feed back to, the point that I made as far as, this is kind of one of the starting grounds, and it's something that I go ahead and bring the word transparency into this, because it's something that Mark has really pressed in the past as well in his training sessions, shouting out those as well, is that I find transparency is really key and important in being able to set these boundaries and operate efficiently, because you just have so many different moving parts and branches and people that you want to be as transparent as possible with each other so that you can get the results that you're looking for without the inconvenient speed bumps of inconsistent expectations of each other. So I'm going to go ahead and throw transparency in here as well, and just echo how important that is with communicating with your teams.
100%. Yeah. I think being transparent helps with all the other things that we're talking about. Mark, what are your thoughts on that one?
So the one thing I would add, and thanks, Rhett, for the shout out, um, is seldom is your first idea the best idea. So on one hand, allow your team, your trusted advisors, your colleagues that you're working with to add to that recipe. Because then all of a sudden you're taking, again, other people with you. They understand the scope of what needs to be accomplished and done. They'll add their flavors, and then they have that buy-in. And then all of a sudden that's building your culture of accountability, right? Or it's enhancing the culture of accountability because, hey, I participated in this, therefore I get, I'm bought in that this is how we're going to move forward. So again, I think it's just the fact that, you all come in with a lot of great ideas. I have a lot of great ideas, but seldom is that first idea the best one. So those are my thoughts around it.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I just toss out, don't be shy about setting expectations around this area. How do you want to be communicated with? And ask the people that report up to you or the people you report to, how do you want to be communicated with? I tend to be a bit of a narrative guy. I actually like narratives. Want to understand the whole picture. But at the same time, then I had to learn how to be concise, right? And we'll give the big thumbs up and kudos. Rhett's laughing because we had the same conversation with Chris about the bullet points, and actually had our CEO yesterday put some comms advice in a Slack channel. Said, hey, when I need an update on something, this is the way I would like to see it laid out, because I think what she had gotten back was, can I have an update on this? And somebody had linked a Slack channel with 100 threads underneath it.
Oh dear.
And for some folks, that's great. I can drill down and I can see exactly what got worked on when by who. And for other folks, right, especially executive senior leadership, they don't have a half hour to go through that thread, right? Give me the facts. So I would just toss that out there. Don't be shy letting your folks know, hey, if there's an emergency, call or text me. If you want a half hour response, Slack me. If you want a response that day, send me an email. I'd like just the facts, or I want the whole narrative, or I think if you can be prescriptive over some of that stuff, or ask how other folks want to receive that stuff, you'll save yourself some angst and some headaches and some lessons learned later on down the line.
Yeah. I'd say one quick thing there that you can actually put into your current workplace, right, is if you should have a regular one-on-one with your manager or employees. So if you don't, work on that first. But definitely that's one of the things that I've gotten from all three of you is, I don't want to hear something second type of thing, right? Well, when I first heard that from Jeremy, I'd give him the whole shebang in a big narrative, and he's like, I want to know about it, but I also trust that you're taking care of it. So then it became, hey, here's the bullets, here's the escalation, I'm taking care of it. I'll put it on our bullets for us to discuss on our one-on-one further this week, right? Unless it's a fire that I need your help putting out. So just a quick tidbit there.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do there when you have a lot of information, just because I feel like you guys keep calling out my bullets, is it's okay to the purpose behind that when you talk about communicating clearly is, everybody's busy. And if 3 paragraphs down is what the action or the requirement, I'm never getting there, right? So right up front, give me a summary, give me the action, and then give me next steps. And then you can always put a dotted line and then put a link to Slack so that if I can't sleep or I'm up early, I can grab that Slack channel and dig down. But I understand the salient point of what I'm looking for, right? So again, that's also establishing those ways of working about how you expect to be communicated with. But let's move forward now to a few things not to do, right? And we've talked about these, but maybe just from the opposite side is start making sudden changes without understanding the why, right? It's really easy to go in and try to take things apart and go, we can do this better, but try to resist that urge, at least initially, to take things apart without getting a clear understanding what it's used for, what the impact would be. It doesn't mean you can't make changes. It just means really take a 360 view of it, take that beat, look around, and then be able to explain why you want to make that change, right? So it's getting in there and understanding, again, like we talked about, how we got here, and then really, is this the right point to make that change? And then helping people understand why it's necessary to change or why you'd like to change it. Guys, what do you think?
It's a mistake we see consultants make all the time.
Well, this is best practice, so therefore this is how we should do it, right? Any thoughts on that one? No, everybody's good.
I wonder if it's role specific. Have you ever taken on a role? I've worked for some folks that have jumped into roles specifically to be what they called themselves, a change agent,
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
where they were hired to be the disruptor. For very specific reasons. And oftentimes that's a really unique personality set because it's not a well-liked role. It's usually a short-term role, 1, 2, 3 years, and then out. Once I've made the required changes, the reason I hired in, I'm out because nobody's going to want to work for me after that point. But I wonder. I would agree with these do nots, right? Because you're negating your positives from above, right? If you're jumping in, make sudden changes without understanding the why, you haven't listened, right? You haven't learned. You're not being sensitive to the history and the work that's gone into certain things. And so,
right.
generally speaking, I would say yes, unless you were brought on board specifically to disrupt maybe a dysfunctional team or massively changing priorities at a company.
Right. Which moves into the next one, which is, don't disrespect the past and dismiss existing expertise, right? Recognize that your team has value. They have accumulated knowledge. Lean into that. Again, learn how we got here or why we got here. It may be something that's changeable, but there may be a very deliberate reason, or it could be cost constraints or whatever it is, but build upon that foundation rather than just tearing everything asunder. What can we repurpose and bring everybody along with us? Mark, what are your thoughts on that one?
Oh,
Hear you,
Mark, you're
Mark.
muted.
Yes, 1,000% agreed on that one. Just being burned once in a 23-minute conversation, all of a sudden, my SVP knew everything that was wrong with, my department. And it's like, really, we're going down that path. But I think, the better lesson learned is understand who the team respects the most, and then make sure you're bringing them in to really get that next level of buy-in, right? To really make sure you're understanding from their perspective, because they have the history, right? They understand what's been going on, and the more you can lean on them, then obviously it's going to then ripple, because then if you are teaming together, then all of a sudden everyone else is like, okay, great. Mark's working with Bethany right now, and we all love Bethany. Therefore, let's all rally around, these concepts. So when you embrace history, it's beneficial. And again, I fully am in alignment with this one.
Yeah, and we've talked about the last one as well, but I think it's important to call out is micromanage or isolate, right? You're coming in new, trust your team to perform their roles, right? Make sure you're providing that clear direction and guidance, but don't step in and start watching every single thing that they're doing. Try to maintain open communication, make sure you're accessible, right? That's why, Rhett, you called this out earlier. Make sure you're having one-on-ones with your team. Give them an opportunity to get to know you in a smaller, safe space. But also that micromanaging, it doesn't engender trust. It doesn't help you build relationships, right? So again, it's kind of the flip side of all the things we say you should be doing, is making sure you don't do that, or you put yourself in a box and you don't get to know people. You don't reach out and establish connections. You just heads down and start working, right? Any thoughts on that one, guys?
No, I think you get it. Oh, Jeremy, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it reminds you to keep the superhero cape off, right? Especially initially. It had to go. We went through an exercise the other day. We had some escalations going on, and we needed to remind the team that, especially in a remote work environment, it's a positive thing to raise your hand and say, "Hey, I need some help." And that may be worth a quick reminder to folks out there as they're jumping into new roles and new leadership roles, even that I don't think anybody's expecting you to have all the answers, and you should raise your hand when and if you need help, and hopefully you're working in a culture where that's acceptable and appropriate and maybe even celebrated, right? Because we don't want people out there working from home in a vacuum, spinning their wheels when there's resources out there that can combine to make things happen quicker.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And to Chris's earlier points around, understanding your strengths and the strengths of your team, then all of a sudden you're creating that powerful pair, right? Hey, you've got something that you're going to bring that's going to help us throughout this entire process. So those are great call out, Jeremy.
Well, as always, this has been a great conversation. Actually, I feel like every time we talk, I learn something. I'm taking all these tidbits and taking them back to my role. So I hope those of you listening also learned something from this. And if you have any thoughts or anything about what we've missed or any additional ideas, put them in the comments. We're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to give us some feedback if there's anything missing. And you really got to watch the video this week. Jeremy's got hearts going. It's wonderful. And before we wrap up, I want to remind everybody that Mark is generously giving. That was easy to say. A Clifton-Strengths assessment and a coaching session for free to someone who is listening to the podcast. So if you're interested in that, make sure to email Mark at partnerwithbrg.com. We'll put that in the notes as well so you can find it. But I really want to make sure you guys get to take advantage of that, because what we talk about, that's what Mark does in your coaching sessions, is getting that one-on-one opportunity. This is a great chance to learn more about yourself, learn more about what Mark does, and really get something that you can take into your role and use it tactfully.
Strategically.
Thank you. I'm having a hard time. It's early. It's early here with the recording, but that is our show. As always, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Generational Exchange. We hope that this conversation between our generations sparks some new ideas and helped you see the business world from fresh perspectives. Please don't forget to subscribe for more insightful discussions across the generations. We have 11 episodes, lots to go back and listen to. If you have a burning question or a comment or an idea you want us to talk about, shoot us an email at cmsrconsulting@gmail.com or put a comment anywhere that we're posting the podcast. But until our next episode, from all of us here at the Generational Exchange, thanks for listening and happy learning.